And a good spiritual morning to you once again. I'm Father Cosmas. Thanks for joining me today for a quick chat and, of course, our morning cup of coffee. And last week we took a break, had some fun videos. We talked about Obi-Wan Kenobi and Bob's Burgers, and I thought so maybe we would get back to some serious videos, a little bit serious, not too theological, but I try to address things that are in the news once in a while. And of course, over the past few weeks, and I hope that nothing has happened in the interim since I'm going to be making and putting out this video. But I thought one of the big issues is obviously gun control. And the same way that I did a couple of videos on abortion when the whole Roe v. Wade thing came out. We haven't heard anything about that, at least not at the time of the video being made, this video. But I thought I would do something on gun control. It's probably going to have to be, again, like abortion, a two-part video on that, just to sort of discuss the issue, just to sort of say, you know, we should be able to talk about things. And not everyone's going to agree with everything that I say, and that's okay. I'm not going to be taking a hard stance one way or another on the issue. I just want to talk about it and just sort of put out a conversation, have a conversation about the issue because it's important and it's, as I said, it's in the news, it's timely, and we're dealing with it right now. So first and foremost, obviously, we're talking about this because there have been some mass shootings, several now, tragic, horrifying events. And the first thing we should do as we begin the conversation is say that our hearts go out, of course, to the families, prayers for the victims. We want to acknowledge that tragedy and say that, you know, we can't ignore that. We can't ignore that this conversation is affecting people personally. And we have to be very careful how we talk about it. We can't just talk about legislation and amendments and realize that this doesn't involve people. This involves people personally. Parents have lost children. You know, family members have lost loved ones. We have to acknowledge that, and our hearts go out to them. But the next thing that I would say, or maybe the first thing that I would say, is I also feel badly, not only for the victims, but for the perpetrators, because they're obviously not well. No one in their right mind walks into a school with an automatic weapon and opens fire on children, or walks into a church or into a grocery store, or again, wherever they've been walking into since I made this video and put it out, and just opens fire. No normal, sane person, no person that's well does that. The person that does that is sick. They're not well. They're ill. They're mentally sick. They're not doing well. And so we have to acknowledge that. That's the reality of it. Is that going to go away? No. And that's the next thing that I would say. Handling the gun control issue is not going to magically solve the problem completely. It's not as if you say, well, we're never going to have mass killings because we'll remove the guns. You're living in a society of hundreds of millions of people. Of those hundreds of millions of people, just statistically, some of them are going to be unwell and dangerous. And they're going to find a way to express that. They're going to find a way to take lives if they're that sick. They might not use a gun. They'll probably use something else. Something as simple as a car can obviously take a lot of lives. And so we have to be very, very careful when we think about this in a very monolithic way. There's just one issue. We solve this one issue. That solves the problem. These problems are very complicated. These issues are very complicated, and we have to treat them in sort of a respectful and complicated way and start talking about some of the different ideas that relate to them. I know people that are diehard gun enthusiasts that would never want to give up their guns. And I know people that are, you know, strongly in favor of gun control and want to see all of the guns in the country confiscated immediately. So we know people on both sides, but we want to at least say, well, where's their common ground and how can we have a dialogue? I think we can all admit we feel terrible for the victims and for the families. We should feel bad for the people that commit the crimes because they're obviously sick and they're not well. And I would say part of solving the problem, and this is going to end up being a two-part video, but what I would say just for this one is also, as we begin the conversation about how to address the issue, one is how do we address the big issue, and then maybe a little bit of addressing of some of the more localized issue. What do I mean by that? You can't just address the weapon, you have to address the perpetrator. You can't just address the gun, you have to address the illness, the mental illness that makes someone use the gun. That's the big issue. The smaller issue is you have to try to enforce legislation that will make it as difficult as possible for people that are not well to be in possession of guns that can kill en masse, right? Assault weapons and multiple rounds of ammunition. So first and foremost, though, we have to acknowledge these people are sick. How did they get like that? And how can we sort of pay attention a little bit closer as a society to people that get like that and watch out for them and try to be sensitive to that and sensitive to them? That's something that all of us bear as a responsibility for us to consider. You know, family members, parents need to be thinking about that and considering that. Teachers, counselors, they need to be aware of that. People in law enforcement, people in social services, they need to be really thinking in a very heightened way, you know, how well is this person that I'm dealing with? Oh, they would never go buy a gun and go into a school and shoot people. Well, now you have to think, maybe they will. How do I make sure they're not going to do that? And if I have any inclination that they're dangerous, how do I help them? How do I solve this issue? So we have to be sort of on heightened awareness at every level to be looking out for people that are unwell and could end up being a danger. And then sort of as a microcosm of that, specifically as it relates to guns, and maybe this is a good segue into what we would discuss in the next video, some of the more of the nuts and bolts of it. But how do we make legislation tougher? And how do we make the requirements tougher so that if these people do slip through all of those cracks, if their family doesn't see it and can't stop it, if law enforcement agencies don't see it, if social services, if education, if no one, if friends, if no one can see it and stop it, at least how the legislation can say, guess what? You shouldn't be in possession of an AR-15. You shouldn't be in possession of 400 rounds of ammo and body armor. How do we stop that in terms of legislation? I think everyone on every side can agree on some of that. And maybe that's a place that we can start the conversation and build and move forward. And we'll discuss more on the next video. Once again, may our Lord and Savior bless us and keep us this day and every day. Amen.